Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today and welcome to the second UK-Israel Women Leading Innovation Panel. I'm Elinor, Partnership Manager at UK-Israel Tech Hub. We are a UK government venture operating from the British Embassy, building tech partnerships between UK businesses and Israeli innovation. Now, the event today is organized by the Prosperity team at the British Embassy and the British Council in Tel Aviv, whose mission is to strengthen UK's relationship with Israel in trade, investment, science, technology. And so we've launched the Women in Innovation Network to utilize this unique position and support women by facilitating opportunities for collaboration and shared best practices between the two countries. Now, given the current economic crisis, we are not surprised to see that the issue of access to funding is highlighted as the #1 challenge, especially for diverse founders. And when we talk about access to funding, it's also about building strong networks, being informed of new opportunities, and the inclusion of founders of all backgrounds. And this is why in our last webinar, we focused on what is being done to support female founders on a public sector level. And today we're tackling this from the private sector perspective, looking specifically at VCs and founders, learning from their insights and real-life experiences. And so I'm delighted to welcome our wonderful panelists who have joined us today. On the UK side, we have Uzma Choudry, VC investor at Octopus Ventures, Nadia Sood, founder and CEO of CreditEnable, and Chris Smith, managing partner at Playfair Capital. And on the Israeli side, we have Inbal Polak, co-founder and CIO of NEOME Investing Club, and Daphna Nissenbaum, founder and CEO of TIPA. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us today. And following today's panel, we are looking at creating more targeted opportunities, sector-focused networking events and workshops, and we would love to know what are the key areas that you would like us to focus on. So please reply to the follow-up email that we will be sending. And also today, again, we have such a diverse audience of women, men, UK, Israel, across different sectors and organizations. And thank you for submitting really great questions. We incorporated them into the discussion. And if you have questions during the event, please submit them via the Q&A box. And of course, if there are any remaining questions, please send them to us. And our panelists have kindly agreed to address them. So just before we start, I would like to thank the teams that have worked so hard on today's event: UK Israel Tech Hub, UK Science and Innovation Network, the Department for International Trade, and the British Council in Tel Aviv. So let's kick off with some short introductions. Uzma, let's start with you. You work at one of the largest VCs in Europe, focusing on deep tech and future health investments. And you actually started as a research scientist. Tell us, please, about the milestones in your career, and such an impressive journey, and about your work at Octopus Ventures.
Yeah, so I've been in VC for just over 2 years and come from quite a unusual background for venture capital as an academic. But my introduction to the world of entrepreneurship and the startup ecosystem was through spin-outs and university tech transfer offices. So during my PhD, I very quickly realized that I couldn't just specialize in a very niche area, and I loved to learn about what other people were doing, what innovations they were building. And so learned a lot about spin-outs, learned a lot about how what we're creating in the labs gets taken to the market. And as you know, UK is really, really brilliant globally in terms of their research output. And from there, I got the opportunity to sort of start at Octopus, looking at more of their deep tech businesses. And I think the requirement was for someone who's super technical and can get really up the curve super fast on more of the financial side. And yes, I've really enjoyed my role here, where I get to delve into really technical businesses and meet some of the most exciting and most technical entrepreneurs in the world. So yeah, that's a bit about my background.
Fantastic, thank you. Now, Chris, you're working with Playfair Capital, which just won the hottest seed fund award, and you've been in investment for over 10 years. Now, we would love to know more about Playfair, but also curious to know whether you have that one investment that got away that you wish that you've invested in.
Thanks very much for inviting me. So yeah, just to give you a quick overview of Playfair. So we're a generalist tech fund based in London. We look at pre-seed and seed deals. And so to be really clear on that, it means that we invest anything from as little as £100,000 up to about £500,000, usually in the first institutional round that the company is raising. We don't have a particular sector focus. We really actually have pretty much an angel DNA. So our founder and chairman, who's also our single LP, was an angel investor. I was an angel investor as well. And so for us, we're really driven by finding amazing founders. That said, we do have a slight preference for deep tech and B2B business models as well. The one that got away, let's start with a hard question. So I think probably it has to be Monzo. Now I say that because Playfair was offered the opportunity to invest in Monzo, which we declined, but our associate Henrik actually invested directly and took a crowdfunding stake. So it turns out that he's a better investor than the whole of our fund.
Great story. Thank you. Nadia, you have such an impressive track record of founding several highly successful businesses, winning the Women in Tech Award, and you even worked with Kofi Annan's speechwriting team. I'd love to hear about your journey and those turning points in your career.
Sure. So like Uzma, I have a really odd background. I actually an academic background in military security policy, which no one including my family, ever understood why I would want to do. But effectively, I ended up an accidental investor because I was good at solving problems, and sometimes investing money helped to solve those problems. So I ended up running big investment portfolios for large corporates across agriculture, healthcare, lots of different sectors, then a private equity fund that was backed by the Norwegian sovereign wealth fund through different entities. And then set up an investment management firm. And in that investment management firm, we tried to tackle big, meaty problems where we could invest and deliver transformative social change whilst also securing commercial returns. And the big problem that we're tackling now in the company that I founded about 2.5 years ago called CreditEnable looks to get debt to small businesses globally in a more efficient manner at a more affordable cost and less time, and to help lenders actually intermediate in that market a lot more cost effectively. So we're like an Uber for the SME credit lending space, if you can imagine that. So delighted to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. Inbal, you've built from the ground up a collaborative community of women investors with a strong vision of changing the investment landscape. Tell us a bit about NEOME's unique structure and what motivated you to advocate in that space of gender and tech.
So thank you for having me, and thank you for hearing and letting the gender side to be spoken of and focused on. So I come from a financial background. So I worked for 20 years in the financial market and as a fund analyst. And when my partner and myself, we came to work with the end clients, and we found that 98% of couples will, even if they don't have an investment background, both of them, the men and the women, it would be 98% of them that the man would be the one to take on the power and the authority over the investment and over the portfolio. And we started researching if this phenomena has any effect. And when we found out that women as entrepreneurs and founders and startups that are for women and for women's wealth, for women's wellness and health do not get funded, we said we have to make change. We have to we can't stay just talking about it, we have to do. And that is why we founded NEOME. we write me, although it is a Hebrew and a Bible name, we write it as the new me, because it is a platform for women, business women, and newcomers that want to learn investment, speak investment, and together we come and we analyze and we seek for new innovation that would really make good and change the world. And this is what we focus on.
Great, Michelle. Thank you. Thank you. Daphna, your innovative company, Tipa, has won so many awards for offering a sustainable solution for the plastic waste crisis, a solution that relies on deep technological innovation. Perhaps you can share with us what has inspired you to start your own business and the impact that you're making.
Sure. So first, thank you for inviting me to this panel. Pleasure to be here today. Actually, by background, I'm coming from a totally different industry, from the software industry. But one day, like 10 years ago, I had an argument with one of my kids about the plastic bottles that he used to take to school. And that actually drove me to find an alternative. And we invented, I initiated Tipa, and we actually developed a technology that can replace plastic packaging with fully compostable one. The inspiration came from nature. So nature also packed, for example, nature packed the orange or the banana. And we invented a package that can be treated the same thing as an orange peel or banana peel that will decompose and fully go back to nature within 6 months. So that's what we did. Today we already sell the technology and worldwide, including in the UK.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's Tipa.
Great, thank you very much. So many early stage startups are unable to stay afloat due to the pandemic, and a lot of advice and tips have been given how to raise funds and how to survive this economic downturn, improve your runway, address market demands. And this advice may be very helpful to some, but to others it may be really difficult to apply. Now, Chris, you focus on seed and pre-seed investments, and I know that you've closed a couple of deals during lockdown. Perhaps you can share with us what we can learn from those who have succeeded and also those who haven't, given the changes that we see in the investment landscape.
Yeah, absolutely. So just for some context, I think last year we closed 9 deals, and so far this year we've closed 4. 2 of those were fully remote, 2 of those we'd met the management team before lockdown. So, you know, we're continuing actually at a very similar pace to last year. Which frankly took us by surprise. I think when the lockdown started, we expected things to slow down. We wanted to believe it was possible to do deals fully remotely, but we're a bit cynical about whether you could build a sufficiently robust relationship with the founder and vice versa over video. But it's proven to be that you can, and I know that plenty of other funds are also doing remote deals as well. So from us, actually, very little has changed. It's broadly positive in that we're still investing. I think for founders, one of the things they just need to appreciate is that the sort of the broader picture, and amongst the 2 different types of investors, I think you've got VCs, I'm sure like the ones on this this webinar, that are still deploying and still investing. But founders also need to be aware there are some funds that are distressed, whether that's because they have LP defaults or issues with their LPs, concerns that they won't be able to raise again. You know, or they're heavily exposed to the sectors that have been hit hardest, like hospitality or travel or leisure. And so I think a really key tip for founders when they're engaging with those investors is to simply ask questions like, how many deals did you do last year? How many this year? How many do you plan to do? What's the split between new and follow on? And really get a sense of whether you're wasting your time or whether that's actually a productive conversation. Mm-hmm. The same applies to angel investors. I think the market there, the professional angel investors who have significant capital to deploy still seem to be writing checks. The more casual angel investor that maybe, you know, has a decent salary and invests a little bit of spare cash have gone quiet because they're worried about jobs. So again, ask questions, just figure out whether people are deploying or not. But there is an opportunity, I think, for founders that VCs are more available. You're probably in a different way because you can't go to events. But I know that plenty of funds are doing office hours. We'll obviously talk about that later. We actually have an open pitches form on our website, and we're probably getting those, and we're responding to those faster than we would have done before. And I think also the ability to jump on a quick initial video call means that you're probably more likely actually to get a VC engaged, at least for that first conversation. So I actually don't think it's quite as negative as perhaps the media have made out.
Thank you. Uzma, Octopus Ventures is focusing on health, finance, and deep tech. How has your decision-making and selection has changed as a result of the crisis?
Yeah, and I think for us, obviously, amidst all of this crisis, as other VCs would have done, was sort of have a look at how the portfolio requirements and needs have changed, and trying to belt up and prepare for that. Equally, I think we recognise that as was the case in previous economic downturns, great companies do emerge in those times, and these are obviously also conditions under which companies will pivot and adapt to the changing conditions, and you will see successful companies coming out of these economic downturns, and we absolutely do not want to miss them. And so I think we're very much open. We're very much aware that there'll be lots, there'll be opportunity coming out despite the economic downturn. There's also, I think, I guess everything that we look at is from a lens, a new lens, in that what does this business look like in post-corona world. And so we very much, I think, with every entrepreneur that we engage in, the conversations also include some narrative on short, mid to long term sort of implications of COVID for that particular business. And in areas like, for example, deep tech, or some of the more frontier tech within health, where the companies remain in R&D for a very long time, rather than are sort of generating revenues as such, we find that their timelines might get pushed out further into the right, because they've had to evacuate the labs and shut down some lab work. But actually other companies have seen that as a very good opportunity to actually start focusing more heavily on their computational side of the work, rather than the lab work instantly, and sort of writing up grants and preparing literature reviews in areas that they would have wanted to delve into as part of the tech development. So I think during the COVID times, it's very much been more of a close relationship with the entrepreneurs that we've been talking to on a regular basis, to understand how things are changing, because we understand that it has been uncertain, there's a lot of uncertainty around this, and some businesses are not able to turn around and say, well, actually this means that this will happen, or that because of COVID, we can tell you exactly the impact this would have had on our business. So we'll have a continual engagement. So very much have closed deals during this time, but also actively looking at deals that are in our pipeline right now, quite far along. So I think we're very much open, and I think it's just going in with sort of a new lens of what does your business look like in this new environment.
And based on the conversations that you have with founders, are there any kind of practical suggestions, best practices that you think that will be helpful to founders in this landscape?
I think I think there was lots of feedback from there. So I think a lot of this has been around, I think planning and understanding what they can prioritize, what they can deprioritize, where I think areas of their business which are going to get considerably more difficult, and the activation energy increases far more for them to tackle those. And so in those cases, it's actually how do you pivot and look at still working towards that value inflection point for your next round, but changing your priorities slightly from that perspective. So I think a lot of that has been around that. And I think there is a lot of frustration, because I think initially there was a bit of a disruption as to, whether some VCs are still open for business. And like Chris touched on, the fact that actually, VCs have to look inwardly and understand, actually, can we raise another fund? What would that look like? Do we have enough cash reserves for our portfolio? That comes to full mind, but that can be very stressful for for founders that are going out to raise and have no sight on, you know, all of the COVID sort of like hitting the fan. So I think we understand it's very difficult. And so I think it's the VC's responsibility as well as actually understanding how they navigate that journey with the entrepreneur, because it is tough. And, you know, you've got to sympathize with that. And I think working in and out, you know, with entrepreneurs as VCs, I think we feel the pain and we understand the sort of stress that they're under. So we keep them quite close on that sort of early conversations, try to give them more material input on, you know, okay, given COVID, I think your business would get interesting to us if you can show this, or over the next few weeks, let's continue a dialogue on how your sales pipeline is being affected or how things are converting on that front, how the behaviors change. So I think you have to be really mindful on the other side of the table as well, that, you know, I think it's something that no one had foreseen, and you've got to take the entrepreneur on that journey alongside and, you know, sort of be quite empathetic from that point of view.
Absolutely. Thank you. Inbal, at NEOME Investing Club, you're building strong connections on both sides with the community of female investors and with the startups. How do you find companies to invest in, and what are the key criteria that you and your co-investors are looking for? Perhaps you can also share an example of a successful investment.
Sure. So our members play a major part in the sourcing of our deals. We are now 50 women, 50 members in the club, and they're all business women that meet on a daily basis startups. At the beginning, our members used to forward us a startup and tell us, do the screening and see if it's a fit. Today, they have also become experienced, and we only get them after they screen and say, oh, this is a startup that I think would be interested for NEOME members. Another source would be, of course, our internet, our website. We are open for applications, and we get around 2 or 3 applications a day. And I would say that referrals from other startups that went through our sift and were part of our screening process, even if we did not invest in them, also refer startups for us to look at. And lastly, we are connected with other angel groups, professional angel groups in Europe and the UK. And we even have members in NEOME that are from UK, and we're very proud of that. And also, of course, from the US. So we're trying to work and open up networks, because as angel investors, sometimes opening the doors and using our network to connect for the startups that we invest in, the first real customer that would open the rest of the market, sometimes that has much more worth. It is much more worth than our $100,000 to $500,000 that we invest in these early stage companies. We invest from pre-seed to round A, and the startups that we look for are startups that really do have the ability to scale and to touch a billion people. I think everybody is looking for that. What we found out that we don't have a specific sector, or we don't have a specific deep tech kind of looking for. We don't have these criteria. As we come as angel investors and we look at, each of us looks at her own portfolio, and we have to diversify it. If we will all invest in one sector, then we're putting everything in one basket. So we diversify, we look at all sectors. We use our network, and you know, we come from Israel, so you always know someone who has something to say about this or that technology. We use our network for the due diligence, but more than that, we do use it to help our startups to connect with the right customers or their following rounds. Good stories are millions. I think that the one that for me was the most moving investing was our first fundraising. Everything went wrong. It is a textbook classic. The week that the startup was supposed to sign at the closing of that funding of that raise, the lead in one of the founders, there were three, one of the founders said that he is dropping out. And it took 1 month, and the second founder said that he's also stepping out. And the lead investor, who was not us as a club, we were co-investing, then drew back the investment. And one founder was left with two angel investors who stood by her side and helped her to bring together the product of diversity and inclusion. They were trying to change the world, change the culture of enterprises to divert and include underrepresented minorities. And she did not stop. And 3 months later, she came back and we invested in her. And only 6 months after that, she closed her seed round. So we invested in a pre-seed in a very shaken and unknown, but in a great founder. And we knew that if she would get out of that, you know, she can do it. And it is a successful story. Black Lives Matter only raised the issue, but diversity and inclusion and enterprises is something that we talk about. Women, and not only women, have to be included, not because it's a regulation, because managers have to understand that it is just a better way to manage their companies. And just, I would use this platform and say that the name of this startup is Junko, and we wish and we help, of course, Elite, the founder, on a daily basis, calls and whatever. We're here to help her whenever she wants.
Great, thank you, great example. Daphna, your company was named Technology Pioneer by the World Economic Forum, and your products are selling worldwide by some of the leading global brands. How has the pandemic impacted your business plan? Can you perhaps share with us a recent business challenge and how you managed to overcome it?
Yes, sure. So yes, indeed, we were announced by the World Economic Forum, and that actually gave us a huge exposure, and we managed to grow up from there as well. What we faced lately with the COVID is that actually we started sales 3 years ago, so we're still in the beginning of the curve, okay, of the adoption curve. And there are companies who start launching our products and joining us in this journey. But what happens in such a period is that companies actually hold launches. Okay, so in a sense, we had to struggle with new clients. They wanted to put on hold their new launches and a new adoption of new technologies, like packaging technology. Plus, we manufacture. Our operational model is a unique model. So indeed, we're in the packaging industry, but we work in a different operational model. So we manufacture overseas with partners in different territories. So we had to face a new era, which we cannot control our manufacturing. We could not control our sales, and we still had to grow. So luckily, we managed to overcome those crises with our teams overseas, and with new way of working. Actually, controlling remotely our operationals, our runs, our trials, our manufacturing processes, etc. So I can say that at the end of the day, maybe we earned something very, very important here. So we can control remotely on the products that we manufacture.
Thank you. Now let's look at specifically at UK Israel investments and partnerships, because a lot of our audience have asked about that topic specifically. And as I mentioned before, at the British Embassy, we create opportunities for bilateral collaborations between the UK and Israel. Now, a great example is the Women in AI delegation that was organized a few years ago by the Science and Innovation Network, where a delegation of 18 British female-led businesses traveled to Israel to meet with leading Israeli founders. Now, Nadia, you've been on this delegation. Tell us why you have joined and kind of the key takeaways from that trip, perhaps ones that you didn't expect to learn.
Yeah, sure. So, you know, the reason I wanted to join in the first place is obviously it's a great opportunity to be 1 week away with 18 founders in different disciplines who are all using AI as a core part of their business. And so part of the reason for me was around getting inspiration from female founders, because we're using lots of AI in our business, but how do you apply it, and what are the innovative ways that people are finding to apply it? I think the other reason to go on the delegation for me was obviously, Israel has probably one of the highest rankings in the world in terms of technology innovation. And I really wanted to see firsthand what was happening there. And I was pleasantly surprised, that an edict that my parents used to always tell me, which was, growing up, and I think this is really, I like to share this with other female founders, because I think it's one of the reasons I was never daunted by being in all male industries. I mean, I was running renewable energy funds where I was like the only woman in the world in certain positions. Again, in the finance sector, it's very heavily underrepresented by women. But they always used to tell me, if you don't try, that's when you failed. It's not about whether or not you fail, but if you don't try, then you will have failed. And I found that, that entrepreneurial spirit in Israel was, every founder I met was like, this is the 15th business I've tried and failed, but it's not really a big deal because I'm on my next one now. And the failure part was about learning and refining and building a stronger, more robust business model. It wasn't about failing, it was about learning. So I think that was for me the biggest inspiration. Of course, being with the other women who we still support each other in a very active way and we're very much in touch. But seeing that firsthand, just kind of reinforced that on the lonely days when you're riding the roller coaster of being an entrepreneur, you're not actually failing, you're trying and you're learning, right? There's a different way of looking at things.
Yeah, and how do you access similar opportunities now that borders are closed?
So it's obviously more difficult now to be physically inspired by people because you can't connect with them. But like Chris was mentioning, what I've tried to do is really just activate my network as much globally as possible virtually. And what I have found is that not only investors, but also supporters or specific expertise that I'm trying to bring to the table has actually been more available to me than normally. Even my own advisory board, which is very stretched for time normally, has been able to spend more time with me because they're not commuting, they're not flying, they're not in so many like physical board meetings. So trying to activate your network digitally, I don't think you have to lose out on the networking opportunities just because you can't meet people.
Yeah, absolutely. And our audience also would love to know if there are other funding sources that you know of that female founders can benefit from in addition to VCs.
Yeah, so there are quite a, like NEOME, there are quite a few angel investment networks. One that's invested in me is called Astia. It invests in high growth, female founded or female managed in the C-suite technology companies. It started in Silicon Valley and has moved out to the UK, India, and other parts of the world. There are also funding competitions that the British government offers and also other governments offer, of course, that are specifically focused on attracting and supporting women entrepreneurs. And I think there are lots of angel investors who don't necessarily declare themselves as investors who are backing women founders, who typically do have a lot of women founders in their portfolio. So kind of to the point Chris was making, it's also about asking the right questions. What's important to you? Are you trying to find diverse teams? I had the same experience as an impact investor. Most of the LPs into our firm didn't call themselves impact investors, but at the end of the day, that was what they were most passionate about, actually, was delivering the social change. So, it's asking the right questions and looking for the opportunities for for women-focused funding, but also for funding that's very relevant to what you're trying to do and the investors that are going to be most relevant to helping you grow. So, you know, you don't just need women investor networks to back you, you need large pools of capital to back you, and that's going to include men. So going after them is equally important.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Nadia. Chris, you focus on investments both in Israel and the UK. Can you perhaps share with us an example of an Israeli startup that you invested in? How was the connection started? How did it evolve? Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was no sort of grand strategy here that we wanted to invest in Israel at the beginning. It was very kind of serendipitous. A guy that I had done an M&A deal with as a lawyer, I think it was in 2012 or 2013. I was at my law firm, he was at Amdocs, the big listed tech company doing corporate development. So we did an M&A deal together. We bought a company for Amdocs. And when you do an M&A deal, it's you really bond with people because you don't really sleep and you work very closely on the transaction. So we finished that. I always remember thinking, Roy, he's the CEO of this company called SciTech, which is in the autonomous flight space. I just remember thinking, really good guy. And when I knew I was coming to Playfair, I looked him up on LinkedIn. It turned out he was the CEO of this company called SciTech. I dropped him a message. It turned out they were raising some money. They hadn't gone out publicly because they raised a little bit of money from an Israeli VC, but thought that maybe topping it up with a UK or an international VC might be attractive. So we started having some conversations. Then I got married and went on my honeymoon. And then I flew to Tel Aviv directly from Istanbul, which is a single man. I don't advise. It took me about 2 hours to get through immigration. But once I did get through immigration, we just had a brilliant conversation. I met the rest of the team. And it really was a classic, to me, what is a classic Israeli business, which is a combination of very deep technology. The CTO is a professor at Ben Gurion, and very strong on the commercial side as well. So we ended up closing that deal. And it's led us to look more closely at the ecosystem. So we did a second deal recently, a company called Orca AI, which also happens to be in the autonomous transportation space, but this time to do with shipping. So they're in the maritime space. And I think what really jumps out for me there is they're the kind of founding team that I'm unlikely to find anywhere else in the world. So the CEO obviously was in the military, one of the elite units as a combat Navy diver. He has a real passion for the sea. He's a second-time founder, successful second-time founder. The CTO, on the other hand, worked with the Israeli autonomous ships program for 10 years. He served on patrol ships in Gaza. His parents were actually had a catamaran that they were sailing around the world, and it was like the third year they've been doing it. So you've just got a team that is so focused, so passionate about what they're doing, but they have the technical skills to back it up. So I think that's where, for me, Israel often has an edge, and I'll find founders there that I could probably not find in the UK. And I think that the opportunity, of course, for collaboration is that the Israeli ecosystem is kind of unbeatable in some of these technological areas, but it's a small domestic market. And I think traditionally Israeli companies may look to the US for expansion, but I think increasingly actually the UK is a good place, perhaps even as an intermediate step. You know, we have a much bigger domestic market, you know, and people here who can help on that next stage of the journey.
Great, thank you very much. And that's certainly one of our missions in the UK Israel Tech Hub, to position the UK as a partner of choice for Israeli startups, because there's a lot of synergies here and unique opportunities for collaboration. So thank you for that, Chris. Daphna, you've expanded to the UK market in 2016. Tell us about the key learnings from this process, and what are the benefits and also the challenges of having UK presence for an Israeli startup.
Well, you want me to talk about challenges? It's a long story. But opening a subsidiary in the UK was actually our first subsidiary. We decided to start with the UK as a market, a big market that used to adopt technologies relatively easily. I mean, well, relatively widely. So we started with the UK, and the challenges were, of course, to find the right people on the ground. to open a subsidiary, etc., which you guys really assisted us in those two challenges.
In the Department for International Trade, right?
Right, exactly. And the second thing is, of course, to approach the right customers, which also a wide network can really assist in that. And that's what we found with you guys and with other resources that we worked with. And eventually I can say that today the UK is our biggest market. We have the biggest team today is in the UK. And hopefully we're looking to grow this market rapidly in the next coming years.
Great, good luck. Now, our audience have asked a lot about, the barriers that women face in the tech and VC industry, and the measures that VCs take to ensure that they're inclusive to female founders of all background and ethnicities. And those initiatives, we know that they are key to closing the gender funding gap. So Uzma, I'd like to ask you, because you've been working in deep tech and hard sciences, which are traditionally male-dominated sectors. Can you please share what are the diversity and inclusion measures that you take at Octopus to ensure your portfolio companies are diverse?
Yeah, our team takes diversity very, very seriously. It's a diversity inclusion is an initiative that is very close to our hearts, and we always believe that you've got to have your own house in order, before you go out and look outside. And I think this is reflected within our own team. So a third of our team is actually composed of female investors. And I think that's one of the areas where this makes it easy, as I think I've spoken to a number of my fellow female colleagues who say that actually when it comes to a lot of these female entrepreneur clubs, such as Female Founded Club, where female investors and female founders can actually have a forum to interact, to discuss potential deal flow and to discuss investments, aids that conversation. A lot of us also mentor and spend far more time with some of the female founders that come through. For us, we also have, we require implementation of a D&I policy for all new and follow-on investments. So any new portfolio that comes into the company and all portfolio companies that are part of it, we ensure that there are D&I policy in place. And we have a talent team that helps our portfolio with any talent related issues and growing the teams and growing the culture. And the talent team regularly delivers workshops on building diverse teams and the value of building those. And I think some of that has come through in our portfolio. So I think about 1 in 3 of our portfolio companies in the last 3 years is a female-led business. Mm-hmm. And 1 in 5 of our businesses has a female exec. And so I think that is really starting to show through. A number of the team obviously also push on initiatives. So I'm part of the Female Founded Club. I know that there are a couple of my colleagues that are actually mentors on the Diversity VC Future VC program. And I think me and a colleague of mine are also working with an initiative known as Into University, which helps disadvantaged students, sort of like look at their options in future in terms of careers. And we are putting together a workshop with our portfolio company and introducing these students and young adults from disadvantaged backgrounds to entrepreneurship and, opening that door there. So I think there's a lot that's going on internally within our team, within, us managing our portfolio, but also outbound initiatives and outbound efforts on that front. I think you're right to point out that, with a lot of deep tech and hard sciences and engineering sort of like space, it's very much male-led. And I think an area where, that's come to forefront on our discussions, in-depth discussions on diversity, is that you'll typically, when you go and do the site visits, you'll see that actually, 90% to 100% of a deep tech team, where, it's quantum computing business is male. And some of that is actually looking at what's coming through the pool and how do you encourage women, young women, to move into STEM subjects? And I think it's actually trying to feed in and addressing it from both ways. So addressing it from, top down when it comes to management and the senior exec teams and the actual, sort of like startup teams. But actually, where do all of these begin from? And these are usually universities. And how do you push women into these subjects that are historically a lot more, sort of like male dominated? And so I think that's led to our involvement with Into University, but has actually also opened a dialogue within our team on, okay, we've got to work on the other side of the funnel as well. And how can we, as a VC, what is it that we can influence on that front and how we can go about doing this?
Great initiatives. Thank you so much, Uzma. Chris, Playfair Capital have also been championing female entrepreneurship, leading on female founders' office hours, receiving hundreds of applications, and also collaborating with other VCs. So your impact and the scale of your initiative is quite big. Can you share with us what has been the main driver for Playfair initiatives in this space and the impact that you're making?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it was made a load of really good points there, I think, to just frame some of the challenges in the issue. I mean, I think the way that we came across it was actually an investment we made in a company called Vine Health, which has 2 female founders. And when we first saw the press release that the founders put together, we saw the stat that less than, I think it was $1, 1 cent in every dollar goes to all female founded teams. There are a bunch of different stats, but they're all terrible. And we were really shocked, actually. We hadn't really seen it like that. We'd just seen them as great founders and a great business, and we decided to do something about it. So we had a couple of female founder office hours events where female founders were invited to come in to have 15-minute sessions with 4 investors. You can pitch, you can use it to ask questions, you can use it for mentoring. And then we've scaled it up just recently, as you said, to a virtual event in collaboration with TechNation, which this time I think we reached 200 founders and with 60 VCs. So as you say, the scale has been going up, which is a good thing in one respect, but a bad thing in another, right? Because it means that it's needed and that there is a problem. And I think we kind of identified, I think there's really 3 key things. One is access. So a lot of the venture industry sadly still runs on warm introductions and networks, and so we wanted to get rid of that. We wanted basically anyone to be able to come along, provided you have a tech company. That's pretty much the only requirement. You can come along and you can meet investors. I think there is the issue of bias, and I think thankfully it's mostly unconscious bias, but I think for female founders, particularly if their business addresses a female market, and femtech could be a really good example, potentially male investors feel it might be a bit taboo for them, they might not understand it, and they might get a pass as a result. So making sure we had, I think it was about 90% of the investors at these events are female as well, helps to deal with that issue. And then I think particularly outside London in the UK, I think female founders don't have, they don't have a really solid mentoring network. So actually just who do you ask questions about what you should do with your business and how to approach investors. So I think for us, the best outcome from the recent events has been, we know we've made lots of good new connections. So we know that the founders are talking to investors now. We know actually some of the founders are talking to each other. So there's some sort of peer support there. We also got feedback, I think 96% of the founders would recommend it to other founders. So I think we're doing something right. But as the biggest thing is it leading to funding? That's what we're trying to solve for. And we actually got a message from one founder the other day that she had met one investor from Ascension Ventures at our event, and that they put a check into the round that she just closed. So for us, that's the acid test. We want to be securing more investment. We think there are 2 other companies that are just about to close rounds that again came to the event and met people that are putting checks into the round. So hopefully a few months from now, when we announce the next event, which is going to be in October with applications in September, hopefully we'll have a few more examples of what's actually led to investments as a result of coming to the event.
Great, we look forward to this one. Thank you. Inbal, in Israel, only 8% of VCs investors are female. So by creating a collaborative group of dozens of female investors, you are starting to redefine the profile of the industry and hopefully making a sustainable change. But what I want to know is how can we further create a meaningful change? What more can we do?
Well, it's a big question. I think I always say that there are 3 channels you can improve and bring gender equality. One is regulation, and this is not my world. The other is speaking, using the media, and it's not my world either. And the only thing that I can do in my own small world in finance is put money to work. And if we come in early stage companies as women investors and we show the founders that we have quality, we have value to bring to the company as women, and bring on their C-level women and give them the same perks, the same options, and the same equity, just like other male employees, then at the end, when they will do an exit, she will get her share of it. And then she can decide if she wants to be an entrepreneur and open her own company, or start to invest in companies that are maybe women-led. I have to say that in NEOME, we invest not only in women founders, we invest in best in class, but 80% of our investments are in female founders. And that is not because we are biased, because we are not biased. And because we see women and men just the same, and we look, and it's not only the gender, anyone with any background would be seen the same. We are looking for good teams. We are looking for teams that can evolve and that can take on difficult, it is very hard to be an entrepreneur. I always tell founders, I'm sitting in the investor seat. I'm not a founder. You have a long road ahead of you. The moment that we start investing, we invest in this company, we want you to see us as part of your force and use us for that matter.
Great, thank you very much. So a couple of questions that came from the audience, and this is open to all of you. Any major trends in the tech industry we can expect to see once the world kind of emerges from the crisis?
Well, I can take that for sure. I mean, we always were riding on the tail of the fact that digitization was going to have to permeate the entire financial services sector, but boy, we didn't have any idea of how COVID would accelerate that at all. I mean, we knew it was accelerating, but now, large financial institutions are crippled under the weight of having to try to service their existing clients. The need for debt has gone up substantially from small businesses everywhere, from individuals everywhere. And so figuring out how to interact with your customer and providing them with a digital experience that's really easy, intuitive, and accessible is going to be absolutely critical. So we think that, we've seen a huge shift in terms of financial institutions engaging much more digitally with their customers, even when they had been adverse to before, and also customers engaging much more digital, wanting to engage much more digitally with the companies that they're working with, because of course they're constrained by not being able to travel, being afraid to travel. And it's so on both sides of the B2B and B2C side of things, we've seen huge digital acceleration, which I don't think is going to slow down at all.
Thank you. And another question about sustainable and impact ventures. If you find that they have additional challenges when it comes to investment opportunities. Who wants to take this one? Yeah.
You mean sustainable technologies?
Yes.
If it's more, I think so. yes, because it's relatively a new era of investing, and there's not enough evidence of successful huge companies or technologies that actually grew to unicorns, okay, in the space of sustainability. But connecting to the previous question, I think that post-COVID, we'll see more and more sustainable solutions in the world, because I think one thing that the whole world learned is that there's a very high connection between the health of the health of the world and our personal health and sustainability. So if we want to keep ourselves healthy, let's first keep the world healthy, and that's sustainability. So I think we'll see more and more sustainable technologies around the world. And I think from my experience, there are more and more investors that are looking to invest in such technologies. So that, I think in that sense, it's good news.
Great, thank you. So just kind of close on a positive and practical note, a question to our founders. If there was one advice that you wish that you were given when you started your entrepreneurial journey, what would that be? Nadia, do you want to take this one?
Well, I was saying to you earlier, Elinor, that, you know, when you start off, I mean, my parents who had been entrepreneurs before me, the first thing they said to me was, "Are you crazy? Why do you want to do that to yourself?" And to some extent, it is true. I think what the advice I wish I had been given, I suppose, was that the earlier you can surround yourself, and that means internally and externally, with talent that understands the specific issue that you're going to have and has also failed on that front before, the more you'll leapfrog over things faster. So one sort of discordant piece of advice that entrepreneurs are sometimes given is that, like, you know, it's all about failing and it's keeping going and everything, which is true to an extent. But I know that you can also fail more cleverly than I have, in that there's a lot of stuff you can learn from other people's failures. And if they're willing to invest a bit of, if you get them on side to invest a bit of time with you early on, there's certain things you don't need to repeat as failures. You can make your own failure mistakes, but not necessarily have to replicate those. So getting that cohort of both competent people internally and competent people externally, mapping out your sort of strategic issues that you see coming up, and getting people to really focus in and help on those is really, I wish I had known to do that more earlier on.
Great, thank you. Daphna, any practical tip that you want to offer to our founders? I think you're frozen there. Oh, okay.
Yes. Am I frozen?
You were for a minute, but now
you're frozen now?
No, now you're fine.
Okay. Okay. So first of all, I fully agree with Nadia. This is a great advice. When I started the company, actually, my husband is a serial entrepreneur, so I got all the right advices, I think. But one thing I would like to say is that be excellent. And don't think that if you're a woman or a man or anything, I mean, that's not the main thing. The main thing is to be the best in class, to be excellent, and then you can do everything. And the other thing I want to say is do the right thing. So if you believe in something, just go with it. Don't listen to everyone. If this is the right thing to do, just do the right thing, but check all the time that this is the right thing to do. And then you'll get there. It's a journey. It's not an easy one. It's a very challenging one, very rewarding one if you succeed. But keep going with your own truth, and you'll win it.
Great, thank you. Uzma, do you want to add something? Practical note?
I think I like what Nadia said in terms of actually learning from others' mistakes. See what other companies that are very similar to you or are in those industries and sectors, so try to go through their sort of growth journey and understanding where they failed, and you don't need to make those mistakes. You'll make your own mistakes, and it's important for you to then sort of, like, you know, failing and again, echoing Nadia on that front, that failing is part of learning. And I think if you, as an entrepreneur, you very much need to have a mindset of actually then trying and not giving up, because you fail when you give up. You don't fail when you try. And so I think it's, you know, failing fast, failing early, and failing cheap. And, you know, really having that sight on those are the people who've done it. And we can actually spend time with them or get to know them and understand what the challenges for their journey was. And I think always when you're looking at your bringing on board investors is understanding, has this investor got experience of working with these companies before? Could they bring like a wealth of information just by coming on board? So I think it's very important to know that you're also in the driving seat when it comes to accepting, you know, the sort of capital you want to accept and who you bring on board as an investor.
Thank you. Inbal, final kind of practical note.
Go with your dream. Do due diligence on what you're doing, if you're doing it right, and also on, just like Uzma said, choose your investors. Choose your investors, who you want to travel this journey with.
Great. And Chris, I know I've read all your articles in Forbes, so I know all the very practical tips that you've written there. Anything you want to highlight?
Thank you for raising that, because that's what I was gonna plug a little bit. I think that you know, as VCs, we have this kind of helicopter view, right? We see thousands of founders and businesses every year, and I think oftentimes founders are making the same, what to us appear like basic mistakes, but if you don't know the VC ecosystem, you probably just wouldn't know, that prevent you getting your foot in the door and prevent you having an effective first meeting with an investor. So, and I think that disproportionately affects female founders, because we said before, they don't necessarily have such a strong mentoring network or naturally have friends or connections in the investment industry. So yes, I would strongly advise people to read those articles. One is around the mistakes that founders make when they first approach investors. One of them is about the first pitch meeting, and there's a couple of others as well.
Great. We'll definitely send it to our network as well. Thank you. So raising capital and entrepreneurship have never been an easy task, let alone during economic downturn and for diverse founders. And so we are so grateful to our panelists who have shared their knowledge, their experience, and also really for the efforts that you make in this space. Thank you so much for your valuable insights and work. And as mentioned, we would like to keep on creating value for our network. So let us know the key areas that you want us to work that are important to you. You're also welcome to send us further questions, which our panelists have kindly agreed to answer. And please check out our online board of opportunities and information that we created for you on our website. And I would just like to conclude by saying a big thank you to the great teams behind this one. Ella Kaplan, Daphna Frucht, Liron Atias, NEOME Friend, Karin Levit, and Ravit Kapunea. Thank you for your great work, and thank you for listening, and see you in a few weeks in our next initiative. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.